It is my honor to introduce Dr. John Bowling, a respected and beloved leader in Christian higher education, whose life and work have left a lasting imprint on thousands of students, faculty, and faith communities around the world. I've known John and Jill since the fall of 1968 when I first stepped onto the campus of Olivet. Dr. Bowling served as the president of Olivet Nazarene University for 30 years from 1991 to 2021, making him the longest serving president in the university's history. During his tenure, Olivet experienced remarkable transformation from record-breaking enrollment to expansion of academic programs and the construction of state-of-the-art facilities, and a deepened commitment to both spiritual formation and global engagement. Under his leadership, the university strengthened its mission of education with a Christian purpose. A scholar and a shepherd, Dr. Bowling is a sought-after speaker, a respected author of more than 10 books, and ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene. His writings and messages have encouraged pastors, educators, and leaders across denominations to lead with courage, clarity, and compassion. Dr. Bowling is a trusted voice in higher education and denominational leadership. He's served on numerous boards and committees and various accreditation and advisory councils, always advocating for the integration of faith and learning. With a pastor's heart and a leader's vision, Dr. John Bowling's legacy continues to inspire and guide. I've had the privilege of working with John on several projects at Olivet over the last 20 years. It's a true privilege to welcome John and Jill here today. And I'd like to just end with echoing a little bit about what Beth had said. If you're a student at Olivet while he was the president, he likely knew your name, and you knew that he cared very deeply for your success. Join me in welcoming Dr. Bowling.
Thank you. Thank you, Mick. Really good, thanks. Well, thank you, Mick. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Daniel, for that inspiring prayer. Lifted my spirits. Thank you, Kim, for the music and the other musicians. French horn, my goodness, fancy. I liked it. And Beth, how good to know that I impacted your mother. Reminds me of a fellow at College Church when I was pastor there. I saw him during the week, and he said to me, "Pastor, I had a dream the other day that you were preaching, and I woke up and you were." So make yourself comfortable. Jill and I are both delighted to be here on this Palm Sunday. It is the beginning of Holy Week, and because of that, this Sunday is sometimes called Palm Passion Sunday. Passion referring to the suffering and death of the Lord Jesus. It is a special, special time. The focus of the Palm side of Palm Sunday, we've already experienced this morning. And didn't you love the children coming in? And I was right down front, could see their faces. It was great. It recalls that moment in the ministry of Jesus when he enters Jerusalem on the donkey to shouts of Hosanna and waving of palms. It was, in many ways, the high point of his earthly ministry. It was a recognition that he truly is Messiah. And so we celebrate that today. That moment when Jesus entered, it was, in fact, the fulfillment of an Old Testament prophecy. In Zechariah chapter 9, we read these words, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." And then the words from Nehemiah that we started this service with, they would have echoed through Jerusalem on that day as well. "Stand up and praise the Lord your God, who is from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, and may it be exalted above all blessing and praise. You alone are the Lord. The multitudes of heaven worship you. You are the Lord God. That was the theme of Palm Sunday then. It is the theme of Palm Sunday today. Jesus Christ the Lord. It is Palm Sunday. But there's more. It is also Passion Sunday. We have to be reminded in this moment that those shouts of Hosanna by the end of the week become cries of crucify him, crucify him, crucify him. How is that possible? You remember that during Holy Week on Thursday night, Jesus met with his disciples and they had a meal together, and at the end of the meal he broke the bread and gave it and the cup, instituting the Lord's Supper. Do this in remembrance of me, he said. And it was on that Thursday night that he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, prayed, finally saying, not my will, but thine. It was on that night that Judas, one of his disciples, betrayed him. It was on that night that he was arrested and taken away. And in the middle of that night, Peter, impulsive, strong Peter, who said, though all may forsake you, I will not. Even Peter on that night, cursing, said, I never knew him. What a change from Palm Sunday to Passion Week. Then came Good Friday, which of course was not good. It was a terrible day. It was a day of loss. It was good only in the light of Easter. Saturday came, quiet, disciples wondering what had happened, a waiting time, a vigil time, and then came Sunday. Bright, glorious Easter Sunday. Easter announcing that the light of Easter is greater than the darkness of Good Friday. Easter announcing that faith is stronger than doubt. Easter, of course, is the pivotal moment of salvation. It is the hinge of history on which our hope rests. But that's Easter. And we're not there yet. And in fact, we should not run ahead. It would not be good to arrive at Easter without facing that holy, dreadful week. So that's our focus this morning, from Palm Sunday to Passion Sunday. We recognize that the hosannas finally get replaced with the 7 last words of Jesus. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. His word to the thief on the cross, truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Then, my God, why have you forsaken me? The agony of the crucifixion. Then he speaks to Mary and the disciple John. Behold your son. Behold your mother. I'm thirsty, he cries. And finally, it is finished. Into thy hands I commend thy spirit. Well, with all of that in mind, we must remember that the suffering, death, resurrection of Jesus, it has no real personal meaning if we don't embrace the Christ in a personal way. It is not just a story. If it's just a story, it reduces Easter to Easter baskets and Easter eggs, but it's more than that. So our focus today is really on the question, where do we find ourselves in this journey from Palm Sunday to Passion Week? A few weeks ago, we set our clocks early. You remember that? We do it every year. Twice a year, we spring forth in the spring, fall back in the fall. And that kind of semi-annual ritual just reminds us that time is measured by clocks and calendars. But that's not the only way to measure time. In reality, it's not the minutes that matter. It's the moments that matter. It's the transformational moments that change the trajectory of our life. So I want to talk to you about that this morning, this encounter that can change the trajectory of our life. All of us have moments in life that shift. Mick was talking about my election as president of Olivet. I was sound asleep. I wasn't on the ballot even. And I got a call at 1:20 in the morning. You've just been elected the 12th president of Olivet. I was wide awake. A phone call, a moment, a single moment changed the trajectory of my life. That happens for us. Marriage, birth, graduations, taking jobs, retirement, all of those moments shift the course of life. But there is no moment quite as significant as a moment of faith. A moment when the reality of the suffering and death of Christ becomes a reality in our life. That's the moment I want you to think about. In the Gospels, there is a very brief and I think somewhat curious reference to a man named Simon of Cyrene. For example, Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, writes, quote, "As they led Jesus away, they seized Simon of Cyrene, who was on his way in from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus." Now, the city of Cyrene was a long, long way from Jerusalem. It's actually in North Africa. And evidently this man, Simon, had come, he'd made the journey from North Africa back to Jerusalem for this Passover feast. The verse says that he was on his way in from the country. So either Simon was just arriving in Jerusalem after this journey, or more likely, he was staying outside of Jerusalem itself in some of the surrounding towns, because Jerusalem would have been very, very crowded during Passover. Well, in any event, this Simon happened to be in the right place at the wrong time. Or maybe it was the wrong place at the right time. Why do you suppose that each of the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, tell us about this brief moment of Simon being summoned to carry the cross? Why do they include it in this story? Is it perhaps because they see in that moment the essence of discipleship, the essence of what it means to follow Christ? Perhaps they remember the words of Jesus, if anyone come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Maybe they saw that being played out, and they wanted to make a note of it. Now, in addition to mentioning it, there is, I think, maybe a clue to why it's included. What transpired between Simon and Jesus in that moment when he's carrying the cross? We don't know what transpired. We don't know if they talked. We don't know what he thought in that moment exactly. But in the Gospel of Mark, there is another interesting little reference. We're told there that Simon was the father of Alexander and Rufus. Why would Mark mention their names if they were not known among the believers? That makes me think that this encounter between Simon and Jesus, this moment when he took up the cross, this moment when he came face to face with the suffering of Christ, I think it became a transformational moment for him. How do you suppose Simon felt in that moment? Suddenly he is pulled out of the crowd, forced to carry the cross. What would it be like if we could ask Simon? Simon, were you frightened? Were you embarrassed? Were you scared? Did you feel his shame? I wonder what Simon would say if he could tell his story from Palm Sunday to the Passion. But let's ask him. Good morning. My name is Simon. I'm a Jew. And you have asked me, so I'm going to tell you. So many things happened that day by chance that I'm convinced it was not by chance at all. In fact, it was my day. It was the day when I came face to face with Jesus. It was my day when I had to decide what I thought about his suffering and death. Your day will be different. Your day will come to you differently. But at some point, everyone must come face to face with Jesus. So, you've asked me, I'll tell you. It's been so long, and yet those feelings and the memories are still fresh in my mind. First of all, you may not know from my accent, but I am Jewish. My name is Shimon, Simon to you. And although I am a Jew, I did not live in the land of our fathers. I lived with my family in North Africa, in the town of Cyrene. And of course, it was a Roman province. In fact, every place was a Roman province in that day. And we just had to tolerate it. We just had to live with it. It wasn't so bad in Cyrene. And there were lots of Jewish families there. Most were merchants and traders. We were what was known as Hellenistic Jews. We were Greek by culture, North African by location, and of course Roman by law. Isn't that an odd combination? African, Greek, Roman, Jewish. My father and mother were very devout Jews, and every year, several from our community would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem for one of the high holy days. And this particular year, I decided to go along for Passover and perhaps even stay a little later to Pentecost. And I decided on this day to take my boys, Alexander and Rufus. They had never been to Jerusalem. Well, the fastest and safest route from North Africa to Jerusalem was first by boat. Phoenician sailors would take you from the port to Israel. It took about 2 weeks total for the ship and the walking on from there, but I didn't mind the trip. In fact, it was fun. We were together. The boys were there, and there were others along with us. In fact, the questions, can you believe it? We were not gone more than 2 or 3 hours when Rufus said, "Dad, are we there yet?" 2 more weeks, but we talked and we walked, and I had been teaching the boys certain psalms. They're called the songs of ascent. They were songs that would be sung by pilgrims as they made their way up to Jerusalem, and so we were part of a great group. In fact, as you got closer to Jerusalem, others were coming, and it was almost wall-to-wall people, and we would walk and sing these songs. I was glad when they said unto me, "Let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet shall stand within thy gates, O Jerusalem." Well, we made our way about 2 weeks, and we arrived the day before Passover began. We arrived early on a Thursday morning, just in time. And as the sun began to rise, we could see Jerusalem in the distance. Mount Zion. Wow. What a sight. The dome of the temple cast its glow toward heaven and the sky as if to say, the most valuable thing in all the world is here, the presence of God. Soon we stopped on the crest of a hill, a Mount of Olives, and we could see the city. There is a beauty about Jerusalem that does not stem from brick and mortar. It is a spiritual beauty, and we just stood there for a long time looking. Soon I heard someone, I think to my left, begin to quote from the prophet Isaiah, comfort ye, my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. and proclaim that her hard service has been accomplished, and that her sin has been paid for, and that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. It was a messianic prophecy. It was a prophecy saying that there would come a day when the Messiah would reign in Jerusalem. But I thought that morning, will the Messiah ever come? What a moment. To stand before Jerusalem is to stand before the face of God. You ask me, so I'll tell you. I felt God's presence. And the boys were so quiet. I stooped down and put my arms around them, and we looked, and it seemed like tears just welled up within me. And I don't know why, but I wept as I held my boys. I think it was because somehow I just wanted them so much to know God. Well, we soon made our way into the city, but just really for a brief time, because we were staying outside of Jerusalem in Bethany with Hannah's cousins, and so we went out there to spend the night. And our relatives told us that the city had been quite a stir that week. Now, it's always that way during Passover, but it was particularly that way this year because of the presence of a young rabbi from Galilee, from the north, who had come to the city, and he had entered sounds of Hosanna. The city was wondering all about, could this be the Messiah? But they went on to tell me that the rulers of the temple were angry with him. In fact, were plotting against him. It had something to do with him turning over the tables in the temple courtyard. One of their neighbors out there in Bethany, a man named Lazarus, had reportedly been healed by Jesus. In fact, now don't get me wrong, they said he had actually been brought back from the dead, that he'd been dead 3 days. That's what Mary and Martha said. No wonder this Jesus had such a following. I thought, I wonder if I might be able to see him. Then I thought a little more about it. The next morning, Friday, we headed back into the city. Alexander, Rufus, and I. It was the first day of Passover. It was the day when the sacrificial lamb was to be killed. It was the day that it happened. As we were coming into the city, part of a great crowd moving in kind of a flowing way, we were actually kind of being pushed along into the city. And just inside the gate, suddenly, the crowd stopped and something was happening up front. They got quiet. People started to stand to the side, and as they did, I looked and saw a group of Romans. You can always tell a Roman. I think it's the garlic. But as I looked at these Romans, I realized it wasn't just a group of soldiers. It was, in fact, a death march. And I held my breath. The boys were there right behind me. I was a bit frightened, particularly of them. The soldiers leading the death march, there were first centurions on horses, and then a man carrying a big sign, a luster he was called, because it had the names and it had the crimes. And then behind them was other groups, 4 soldiers, and in the middle, a criminal being led along. And one of them had been beaten so badly, and he was struggling. I looked away, and then as I looked back, I saw 2 soldiers coming right to me. And as I backed up, one of them grabbed my arm and said, "Come with me." Well, I knew I had no choice. They were Romans, and the Romans had a law called the law of inscription, and they could force anyone to carry a burden for them for a distance of up to a mile. And so he said, "Come with me." And he pulled me into the center and put the cross on my back. And as I lifted the cross, I turned and looked at the prisoner. I have no words to really tell you what that look was like. I looked into his eyes, and there was suffering, but there really was no fear. There was pain, but there was also a sense of peace. Well, we walked on out of the city just beyond the gate to a hill called Golgotha, the place of the skull. And when we got there, a large crowd had gathered. It was amusement for them. They'd come to see these criminals put to death. Captain of the guard began to bark orders, charges, and the sentencing was read aloud. And the soldiers took the cross from my shoulders and pushed me aside and put it on the other man. I wanted to run. I wanted to get out of there. I wanted to find the boys, but I couldn't leave. I just couldn't leave. And I watched as they laid the cross down and they stretched out this prisoner onto there. And with great spikes, they drove spikes into his hands and through his ankles. And then with ropes, they raised the cross and it thudded into the ground, and you could almost hear the flesh tearing. And then I saw what was written: King of the Jews. And a soldier speared the man in the side, and they mocked him. And I realized that was Jesus. That was the rabbi. That was the one that everyone had been praising. Where were his disciples? How could this happen? I then heard him pray, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But I'll tell you, I thought to myself, they know exactly what they're doing. It was sickening. Well, I couldn't stay any longer. I turned, I crossed the road, headed back to the gate, and there I saw the boys. They had been watching from a distance, and once I made sure they were okay, I told them what had happened. And I told them about that prayer. Alexander said he heard one of the soldiers, a centurion, say to another, surely that man is a righteous man. Well, you've asked, and so I've told you. But there's a little bit more. We went back to Bethany, and we began to hear rumors after a couple of days that this Jesus, who was clearly dead, we heard rumors that he was in fact alive. And so we went to see Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and they told us all about who Jesus was. And I began quietly asking while I was in the city. We were waiting several weeks now till Pentecost, and I asked, do you know about Jesus? And I finally found some of his disciples, his followers, and they said, he is alive. We've seen him. As unbelievable as it sounds. And then, when the day of Pentecost came, the disciples, his followers, who had been so fearful, suddenly they took to the streets and with boldness started to proclaim about this Jesus, Messiah. And many people believed, and I believed. I believed. I knew it was true. Well, things have never been the same since that one day when I encountered Jesus. And my boys, Alexander and Rufus, they've become part of the church. His followers, they're friends with Mark. I just can't get over what a difference one day can make in a person's life. A day when they see Jesus. A day when they come to faith. You asked me, so I've told you. I think of Simon of Cyrene, who crossed the city gate when forth the stream was pouring that bore thy cruel fate. I ponder what within him the thoughts that woke that day, as his unchosen burden he bore that unsought way. Thou must have looked on him, O God. Turn and look on me, till I shall see and follow and bear thy cross for thee. Must Jesus bear the cross alone, and all the world go free? No, there is a cross for everyone, and there's a cross for me, and there's a cross for thee.